On a peaceful, vibrant world called Elixia, life had flourished for centuries. The people of Elixia were advanced, with technology that far exceeded anything Earth had ever imagined. Their cities gleamed with towering structures, and their ships sailed across the stars as if the universe was their playground. They had encountered many species, and to them, humans were just another species, primitive, fragile, and weak. It was this belief that led them to target a small human colony on a distant world, Earth's outpost on the fringes of their empire. The Elixians had been curious about humans for years, but they had never fully understood their potential. To them, humans were like insects, scurrying, weak, and insignificant. But they had made one mistake. Solara, a young human girl, was the unfortunate target of their misguided curiosity. Only 12 years old, she had wandered far from her family's settlement, unaware of the dangers lurking in the unfamiliar city where she had arrived. Elixians were known to be powerful, with abilities and technology that could easily overwhelm an unprepared species like hers. And so, when they found Solara alone, they saw it as the perfect opportunity to experiment. The Elixians had no concept of mercy. Their leader, a cold and calculating commander named Zix, was particularly eager to test the limits of the human child. Solara was taken from the streets without resistance. Her cries of confusion and fear were dismissed as the meaningless protests of a weak being. In their lab, surrounded by strange equipment and unfamiliar devices, Solara was placed in a containment field. The Elixians believed they could push her mind to the breaking point and see how much human endurance could withstand. They used strange devices to alter her perception of time and space, to make her feel as though she was trapped in an endless loop of nightmares. They thought she would crumble. For days, the Elixians subjected her to their experiments, their cold eyes watching her every move. They tested her endurance, her ability to withstand fear, and even the limits of her emotions. The Elixians believed that they were proving a point, that humans, unlike other species, were nothing more than fragile creatures whose only purpose was to be studied and understood, and ultimately controlled. But what the Elixians didn't know was that humans had something they could never understand, something that no technology, no experiment, could ever break: the strength of their spirit. Solara, though terrified and alone, refused to surrender. Even as her mind twisted under the influence of their devices, she held on to a small piece of hope. She thought of her family, her home, and the love they had always shown her. This thought kept her grounded, even when the Elixians tried to break her. Zix and his team watched from their observation room, growing more intrigued with each passing moment. They couldn't understand how the child was still standing, how she could resist their tests with such stubbornness. They pushed harder, turning up the intensity of the experiments. But Solara's spirit did not waver. Back on Earth, Solara's parents, desperate to find their daughter, reached out to the government. But Earth was not what the Elixians thought it was. The planet had long since hidden its greatest secrets, secrets that were now about to come to light. Solara's family had no idea that Earth had prepared for such a day. They had no idea that hidden deep beneath the Earth's surface, in places even the brightest minds had forgotten, a secret fleet was waiting. It was a fleet built in silence, a fleet that had been created to protect humanity against threats like the Elixians. Earth's leaders had kept this fleet a secret, knowing that the time might come when they would need to deploy it. And now, with Solara's cries reaching across the galaxy, that time had arrived. The first signal was sent out from Earth's hidden control center. The fleet, long dormant, began to awaken. The machinery hummed to life. The ships powered up, and humanity's hidden strength stirred. Earth's fleet was about to deploy. And they were not coming for war. They were coming for one thing: the rescue of a single child. As the Elixians continued their experiments on Solara, unaware of the approaching threat, Earth's fleet began its journey to Elixia. They had no idea what awaited them on the other side of the stars, but they were united in their mission. The Elixians had underestimated the power of a single human child, and now they would learn that Earth was not the weak, fragile planet they thought it was. It was something much stronger. While the Elixians continued their cruel experiments on young Solara, a far different scene was unfolding on Earth. Solara's family, desperate and frightened, had sent out a message, a simple cry for help that, to them, seemed like a last resort. They had no idea that their plea would set in motion a chain of events that had been years, even decades, in the making. On Earth, tucked away in a place where even the most powerful leaders of the planet did not know the full truth, was the Vanguard. The Vanguard was not a military organization, not in the traditional sense. It was an ancient, secret group formed in the aftermath of the Great Wars, when humanity had finally realized that it was not alone in the universe. The members of the Vanguard were not just military commanders or scientists. They were the protectors of humanity's future. For centuries, the Vanguard had worked in silence. They had built a fleet of ships, each one more advanced than anything the world had ever seen. These ships were not designed for exploration or diplomacy. They were designed for defense, for the day when humanity might face a threat that was beyond the reach of normal weapons or armies. The fleet had been hidden in the deepest parts of Earth's oceans, buried beneath layers of ice and rock, where no one could find it. It was only activated when humanity's survival was in question. And now, with the Elixians tormenting one of their own, the time had come. The Vanguard's base of operations was located in a remote area, far from any major cities. The facility itself was hidden within a mountain range, and only a select few knew of its existence. Inside, advanced computers hummed, tracking the movements of the stars and the activities of other species. The message from Solara's family had been intercepted almost immediately, and Earth's leaders, those who were aware of the Vanguard's existence, knew exactly what it meant. The command to deploy the fleet was given. In the quiet of the control center, a series of lights flickered on. The signal had been sent, and deep beneath the Earth's surface, the fleet's engines began to stir. It had been years since the fleet had been activated. For so long, the ships had been idle, waiting for a day like this. Now, that day had come. Each ship in the fleet was a marvel of human ingenuity, designed to be faster, stronger, and more resilient than anything the galaxy had seen. The Vanguard had spared no expense in preparing for this moment, knowing that Earth's defense would rely on these ships alone. Some of the ships were capable of cloaking themselves from enemy detection, while others had weapons so powerful that they could take down entire fleets with a single strike. But the true power of the fleet lay not just in its technology, it lay in its crew. The Vanguard's members were trained from birth. They were selected for their intelligence, their courage, and their ability to remain calm in the face of danger. They had been raised with one purpose in mind: to protect humanity, no matter the cost. They had been trained to understand that the galaxy was full of dangers, and that humanity's place in the universe was not guaranteed. Among the Vanguard was Commander Ilara, a woman whose leadership and tactical genius had made her one of the youngest commanders in Earth's history. Ilara was calm under pressure, able to see the bigger picture even when the odds seemed insurmountable. She had been chosen to lead the fleet, and she knew the weight of the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders. The fate of a child, and perhaps the fate of humanity itself, rested in her hands. As the fleet began to mobilize, Ilara stood in the command center, staring at the large holographic map that displayed the location of Elixia. She knew the challenge ahead would not be easy. The Elixians were powerful, and they were not likely to surrender quietly. But she also knew that Earth had one advantage the Elixians could not comprehend: humanity's unwavering determination. "Prepare the fleet," Ilara said, her voice steady. "We will not fail." Around her, the officers and engineers worked quickly to ready the ships. The engines roared to life, and the massive fleet slowly began to rise from its hidden base, disappearing beneath the surface of the Earth. They were on their way to Elixia. One purpose in mind: the rescue of a single human child. At the same time, News of the fleet's deployment spread through Earth's highest ranks. The political leaders who had kept the existence of the Vanguard a secret for so long understood what this meant. It was not just about saving Solara. It was a message to the rest of the galaxy. A message that humanity was not weak. A message that Earth would not stand idly by while its people were harmed. The Elixians had made a grave mistake. They had thought humans were fragile, easy to manipulate. They had underestimated the strength of a single child. They had underestimated the strength of humanity. As the fleet sped toward Elixia, the stars outside seemed to grow larger, more real. The galaxy was about to learn what Earth was capable of. And the Elixians, they were about to find out what happened when you tormented a human child. The hum of the engines echoed through the vast, underground facility. Hidden beneath layers of rock and ice, the fleet had been dormant for centuries, its purpose known only to a select few. But now, with the command given and humanity's future at stake, it was time for the fleet to rise. At the heart of the operation was Commander Ilara. She stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays in front of her. The fleet was ready. The ships, each one a masterpiece of human ingenuity, were awakening. The sleek, silver bodies of the vessels gleamed under the artificial lights, their powerful engines roaring to life for the first time in years. Ilara knew the importance of this mission. The Elixians, with their advanced technology and pride, believed themselves to be the superior species in the galaxy. They had underestimated humanity, its resilience, its determination. And now, they would see what Earth was capable of. The command center was bustling with activity. Officers, engineers, and tactical experts moved swiftly, their training kicking in as they prepared the fleet for its journey to Elixia. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a quiet sense of confidence. The Vanguard had trained for this moment for years, and they knew exactly what they needed to do. Ilara, a voice called out from behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Kale, one of the fleet's top tacticians, walking toward her. He was calm, but his eyes revealed the seriousness of the situation. "We're ready to go," Kale said, his voice steady. "The ships are powered up and the cloaking devices are online. We can leave whenever you give the order." Ilara nodded, her mind focused. The cloaking devices would be crucial. The Elixians had advanced sensors, and if they detected the fleet's approach too soon, it could jeopardize the entire mission. Stealth and precision would be their allies. With the fleet cloaked, they could slip past the Elixian defenses unnoticed, striking when the moment was right. She glanced at the map of the galaxy displayed on the main screen, her finger tracing the path to Elixia. The journey would take several days, but Ilara knew that time was not on their side. Solara, the young girl, was still trapped on Elixia, enduring the Elixian experiments. The fleet had to reach her before it was too late. "Initiate the launch sequence," Ilara commanded. Immediately, the officers began inputting the commands. The sound of engines igniting filled the air, and the massive doors of the facility began to slowly open. Outside, the stars sparkled like diamonds, their light reflecting off the sleek ships as they ascended into the cold, dark void of space. As the fleet broke through the Earth's atmosphere, Ilara took one last look at the planet below. It was a beautiful sight, but she knew that the mission was bigger than any single world. This was about humanity's place in the galaxy. It was about proving that Earth was not a planet to be taken lightly. The fleet, now fully cloaked, moved in formation as it entered the vastness of space. Each ship was designed for speed and agility, capable of outmaneuvering even the most advanced enemies. As they traveled deeper into space, Ilara's mind focused on the task ahead. There would be no room for mistakes. The Elixians would not surrender easily, and the stakes were too high. For days, the fleet moved silently through the void, its cloaking technology ensuring that no one could detect its presence. The silence of space was almost comforting, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. But Ilara knew that they had no time to waste. Every moment they delayed brought Solara closer to danger. Finally, the fleet reached the edge of the Elyxian system. The stars in the distance began to shift, and the outline of Elixia appeared on the screens. The fleet was now in position, only a few hours away from their target. It was time to begin the final phase of the mission. Ilara stood up from her seat, her voice steady as she addressed the crew. "We are about to enter Elyxian space. We will remain cloaked until we're in position to strike. Our objective is clear: rescue Solara and send a message to the Elyxians. We will not leave until our mission is complete." The officers nodded, their faces set with determination. This was the moment they had trained for. They knew the risks, but they also knew the importance of their mission. Solara was not just a child. She was a symbol of humanity's strength, its ability to stand up to those who would try to break it. As the fleet drew closer to Elixia, Ilara couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. They were about to make history. The galaxy would never forget the day Earth's fleet rose from the depths and showed the universe what humanity was capable of. And when the fleet reached Elixia, it would not be the Elixians who would dictate the terms. It would be humanity. And the message would be clear: never again. The fleet moved silently through space, cloaked and unseen by the Elixian sensors. They were so close now, only a few light minutes away from Elixia. Commander Ilara sat in the command center, her eyes focused on the digital display, showing the approach to the enemy planet. The tension was thick, and even though they were invisible to the Elixians, every officer aboard the fleet could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The Elixian planet, a world of towering spires and vast cities, seemed peaceful from the outside. But Ilara knew better. Beneath the surface of this seemingly beautiful world, the Elixians were conducting experiments that could break the spirit of anyone unlucky enough to be their prisoner. And one of those prisoners was a child, Solara. As the fleet neared Elixia, the time for stealth was coming to an end. The Vanguard's mission was simple: rescue Solara and send a clear message to the Elixians that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The ship's cloaking technology had served them well up to this point, but now they were within range of the planet's defenses. It was time to act. "Prepare for decloaking," Ilara ordered. Her voice was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. They had come this far, and nothing would stop them from completing the mission. The fleet's cloaking devices powered down, and for the first time since leaving Earth, the ships were visible to the naked eye. They appeared as dark, sleek silhouettes against the stars, their sharp edges cutting through the blackness of space. The moment they emerged from the cloak, alarms began blaring on the Elixian command stations. The ship's appearance was like a sudden shockwave, rippling through the peaceful atmosphere of the Elixian planet. The Elixians were caught off guard. Their pride had led them to believe that no one could sneak into their system, let alone challenge them. Their sensors had never detected the fleet, and their military defenses were designed to deal with traditional threats, not the swift and stealthy force they now faced. They scrambled to activate their defenses, but it was too late. Ilara's voice rang out over the comms: "Initiate the first strike. Disable their communication array." The first wave of attack was swift and precise. A barrage of energy beams erupted from the Vanguard fleet, targeting the Elixian communication satellites. The first few hits landed perfectly, knocking out their ability to send messages or organize a defense. Within seconds, the Elixian fleet's ability to communicate with each other was shattered. A second wave followed, striking their power plants and disabling key infrastructure across the planet. The Vanguard ships moved with a grace that came only from years of training. Each shot was calculated, and every action was part of a larger plan to dismantle the Elixian defenses without causing unnecessary destruction. Back on Elixia, panic spread through the Elixian capital. The government was completely caught off guard, and their military, though powerful, was now fragmented. The Elixians had built their empire on the belief that they were invincible, but the sudden attack from the human fleet shattered that illusion. They had never expected humanity to be so advanced, so prepared or so determined. Commander Zix, the leader of the Elixian forces, stood on the balcony of his command station, staring out at the fleet above. His eyes narrowed as he watched the Earth ships dance through the stars. How could they have done this? He muttered to himself. How could humans have hidden such power from us? He was not the only one shocked by the appearance of the human fleet. The Elixians had underestimated humanity's resolve. They had believed that Earth was just another insignificant planet, a backwater in the galaxy. Now, as their systems failed one by one, they realized the full extent of their mistake. The Vanguard fleet continued its calculated assault, taking down the planet's most vital systems without causing unnecessary harm to the innocent citizens of Elixia. Their mission was not to destroy the planet, but to send a message that humans would fight back against those who sought to harm them. Move into position, Ilara ordered. It's time to strike at their main base. We end this now. The fleet began its final approach toward the Elixian capital. The enemy had not yet mounted a full counterattack, and the Vanguard was in control. The human ships hovered above the capital, their weapons at the ready. The message was clear. Earth was not a place to be forgotten, not a people to be ignored. The child Solara would be rescued, and humanity would not be silenced. From the ground below, the Elixians looked up in disbelief. Their once proud empire was being torn apart by a force they never expected. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vanguard fleet hovered over the Elixian capital, its ships a shadowy presence against the planet's dimly lit surface. Commander Ilara stood at the head of the command center, her face focused and determined as the mission reached its critical moment. The Elixians, though disoriented by the initial assault, were beginning to regroup. Their military forces had been shaken, but they were not finished yet. However, Ilara had no intention of letting them regain control. The time had come to rescue Solara. Prepare the extraction team, Ilara commanded, her voice steady but filled with purpose. We'll move quickly and we'll move quietly. No mistakes. Around her, the crew of the Vanguard was already springing into action. Ilara knew that the best way to save Solara was to get in and out before the Elixians could mount any sort of meaningful defense. They had already disrupted the planet's communications and taken out several key facilities, but now it was time to focus on their primary objective: the rescue of the young girl who had become a symbol of humanity's strength. In the depths of the Elixian capital, Solara was still locked in a high-security facility, her body weakened but her spirit unbroken. For days, she had endured the Elixian tests, but she had never lost hope. Every time they tried to break her, she thought of her family and the love they shared. It was that love that kept her strong, even as the strange alien machines twisted her mind. Inside the facility, guards paced back and forth, unaware of the impending rescue. The entire building was surrounded by layers of security, shields, alarms, and high-tech barriers designed to keep out any intruders. But the Vanguard had anticipated these measures. They had a plan. As the fleet's ships hovered above the city, Ilara activated the ship's cloaking device once more. The extraction team would travel in silence, invisible to the guards and sensors. They would slip into the heart of the facility and retrieve Solara without anyone knowing they were there. Inside one of the Vanguard ships, Lieutenant Kell was preparing the extraction team. He and his team of specialists were the best of the best, trained for this kind of mission. They had practiced countless times for moments just like this: stealth operations, high-risk rescues, and quick in-and-out strikes. Today was no different. We have a narrow window, Kell said as he reviewed the map of the facility. Once we're in, we need to get Solara and leave before they can react. The moment we decloak, the element of surprise will be gone. The team nodded in agreement, and within moments, they were ready. The ship's door slid open, and the team dropped silently to the ground just outside the facility's perimeter. Their suits were equipped with advanced cloaking technology, just like the ships above them, allowing them to blend into their surroundings. As they made their way to the facility, Ilara watched from the command center, her eyes fixed on the progress of the extraction. Her team was moving swiftly, avoiding detection as they reached the outer gates of the high-security building. Every step, every decision was crucial. Within the facility, Solara had begun to lose track of time. The Elixians had subjected her to so much mental manipulation that she could no longer tell if it was day or night. But despite the confusion, one thing remained clear. She was still alive, still fighting. Suddenly, she heard a noise. Something was different. The air felt lighter, and she could sense a strange shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then a figure appeared in front of her, cloaked in shadows. "Solara," a soft voice whispered, barely audible above the hum of the facility's machines. "We're here to rescue you." Solara blinked, unsure if she was imagining things. She had been so isolated, so alone, that it almost felt like a dream. But the voice was real, steady and kind. The figure reached out and gently removed the strange device from her head, which had been causing her so much pain. She gasped as the pressure in her mind lifted, and for the first time in days, she could think clearly again. Who are you?" Solara asked, her voice weak but full of curiosity. "We are from Earth," the figure replied, "and we've come to take you home." With a sudden surge of hope, Solara tried to stand, her legs shaky from the days of confinement. But her savior was quick to support her, and with steady hands, they guided her out of the room and through the dark corridors of the Elixian facility. The extraction team moved quickly, staying in the shadows as they navigated the facility. They knew the dangers that lay ahead, and they knew that every second counted. The Elixians had no idea that their captive was being freed, yet. But that would change soon. As Solara was led down the hallways, she couldn't believe what was happening. She had been trapped in this place for so long, subjected to experiments and fears that no child should ever endure. But now, here she was, being freed by strangers who were willing to risk everything to save her. "Stay close," one of the team members whispered as they neared the exit. "We'll be out of here in no time." Solara nodded, feeling the weight of her situation lifting with each step. It was hard to believe that someone was actually coming to her rescue. That Earth, her home, had not forgotten about her. The team reached the final door, and as the heavy security barriers slid open, the night air was a welcome relief. The Vanguard ship was waiting for them, cloaked in the shadows, ready to carry them back to safety. Mission accomplished, Ilara said into her communicator, her voice filled with relief. "We have Solara. Prepare for departure." As the team and Solara boarded the ship, the vessel lifted off the ground, its engines powering up. They were leaving Elixia, and they were taking with them more than just a rescued child. They were carrying the message that Earth was not to be underestimated. The Vanguard fleet soared through space, its cloaked ships leaving the Elixian system far behind. The engines hummed quietly as the crew worked in unison to guide them home. In the heart of the lead ship, Commander Ilara stood, her eyes fixed on the stars outside the window. She had completed the mission. Solara was safe, and Earth had sent a message to the Elixians. But Ilara knew the battle wasn't over yet. There would be consequences for the attack, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the Elixians would not forget this. Inside the ship's med bay, Solara lay on a cushioned bed, surrounded by medical equipment that hummed softly as it worked to stabilize her. The young girl's body had been through so much, days of painful experiments, harsh conditions, and mental manipulation. But now she was free, and the relief on her face was evident. Ilara walked in, her footsteps quiet on the metallic floor. She could see the change in Solara. The fear was slowly fading, replaced by the flicker of hope that had been extinguished in the dark corridors of the Elixian facility. Ilara approached the bed, smiling gently. "You're safe now," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "You're going home." Solara blinked up at Ilara, still unsure if this was all real. "Home," she whispered. I thought I'd never see Earth again. Ilara nodded. You will. We've got a long journey ahead, but we're taking you back to your family. Solara's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. She was going home. It seemed almost too good to be true. Across the command center, Lieutenant Kale watched the scene from a distance, his expression serious. He had been part of the team that rescued Solara, and though he was glad to see the child safe, he knew that their actions would not go unnoticed. The Elixians were not a race to be underestimated. They would retaliate, and when they did, the vanguard would need to be ready. Ilara, Kale spoke up, his voice filled with concern. We've received new intelligence. The Elixians are mobilizing their fleet. They're not just going to let this slide. Ilara turned to face him, her expression hardening. She had anticipated this. The Elixians had suffered a blow, but they were too proud and too powerful to back down without a fight. Earth had made its point, but it had also painted a target on its back. They'll be coming after us, Kale continued. And we won't be able to hide forever. Their fleet is faster than we anticipated, and they're already adjusting their strategy. Ilara crossed her arms, her mind racing. The fleet had already sustained damage in their initial strike, and their resources were limited. Earth's forces were strong, but they were outnumbered by the Elixians, who had the advantage in technology and firepower. We'll have to be smarter, Ilara said, her voice sharp. We need to outthink them, not just outfight them. She turned back to the command station, her gaze focused. There had to be a way to turn the tables. The Elixians might have the numbers, but humanity had something they didn't: determination. The Elixians had underestimated Earth's resolve, and that was a mistake they would soon regret. Ilara, Kale spoke again, this time more carefully. We need to make contact with Earth's leadership. They need to know what's happening. Ilara nodded, her mind already processing the next steps. The leadership on Earth needed to be informed, but there was more at stake here than just military strategy. This was a battle for the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. If they could not defend themselves now, the Elixians might come to see Earth as a weak link, an easy target for future exploitation. We'll make contact with Earth, Ilara said firmly, but we need to be ready for whatever comes next. The rest of the crew had already begun preparing for the possibility of an Elixian counterattack. Engineers worked on repairs, while tactical officers reviewed strategies for their next move. The mood on the ship was tense, but there was a quiet confidence in the air. The vanguard had faced impossible odds before, and they would face them again. Meanwhile, on the distant planet of Elixia, Commander Zix paced angrily in his command center. His pride had been shattered by the sudden appearance of the Earth fleet. The Elixians had never expected humanity to strike so decisively, and now they had to deal with the consequences. We will not let this stand, Zix growled. Prepare the fleet. We will reclaim what is ours. Zix knew that the battle with Earth had just begun. He had underestimated them, but he would not make that mistake again. The Elixians would regroup, and they would find a way to strike back. And when they did, the vanguard would be ready. Back on the vanguard ships, Ilara continued to work with her team, preparing for the challenges ahead. The mission had been a success, but the war was far from over. The stakes had been raised, and humanity had drawn the attention of a powerful foe. But one thing was certain: Earth had proven that it would not go down without a fight. As the fleet moved deeper into space, Ilara couldn't help but feel a growing sense of pride. Humanity had taken a stand, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with the strength of a species that refused to be broken. The vanguard fleet had traveled far from Elixia, its cloaked ships now cutting through the stars on their way back to Earth. Commander Ilara stood at the helm of the flagship, staring at the digital map that displayed their current location in deep space. The mission to rescue Solara had been a success, but the Elixian threat was far from over. The reality of the situation was heavy in her mind. Earth had made its mark in the galaxy, but now it would have to prepare for the inevitable. "Commander," Lieutenant Kale said, stepping up beside her, "we've just received a message from Earth's command center. They're ready to assist, but they need our status report." Ilara nodded, her expression hardening as she turned to face him. "Get the communication channel open. We need to share what we've learned. Earth's leadership needs to understand the gravity of the situation." Kale quickly moved to the communication station, tapping a few buttons to establish the link with Earth. A few moments later, a stern voice came through the speaker. "Commander Ilara, this is Earth Command. What is the status of the mission?" Ilara took a deep breath before responding, her voice firm. "The mission was successful. We've rescued Solara, and she is safe aboard the Vanguard. However, we've also confirmed that the Elixian fleet is mobilizing. They are preparing to retaliate." There was a pause on the other end of the communication channel, followed by a low murmur of voices as Earth's command processed the information. "We've been expecting this," the voice on the other end said after a moment. "Prepare for reinforcements. We're sending support, but you'll have to hold your ground for now. The Elixians are powerful, but they've underestimated humanity." Ilara felt a surge of pride at those words. She knew that Earth's forces were ready, but she also knew that this would be their greatest challenge yet. The Elixians were a vast, powerful empire, and they had resources that Earth had never encountered before. But Earth had something the Elixians didn't: resilience. It was that very spirit that had brought them this far. "We will hold our ground," Ilara said firmly. "But we need to act fast. We can't wait for the Elixians to make the first move. We need to take the fight to them." On the ship's bridge, the crew worked quickly to prepare for the incoming battle. The engineers made final repairs to the ship's weapons and shields, while the tactical officers analyzed every possible scenario. They knew that a head-on confrontation with the Elixians would be dangerous, but they also knew that the Vanguard fleet had the element of surprise on its side. As the fleet continued its journey toward Earth, Ilara gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. The stakes were higher than ever, and they had to be ready for anything. "We're facing a much larger enemy force," Ilara began, her voice steady as she addressed the group. "But we've already proven that we can outthink them. The Elixians believe they are invincible. It's our job to prove them wrong." The officers nodded, their expressions serious but resolute. They had trained for this moment, and now it was time to put their skills to the test. "We'll use our speed and agility to stay one step ahead," Kale said, his eyes bright with determination. "We'll strike where they least expect it." Ilara smiled at the team. "Exactly. And most importantly, we'll fight together. The strength of this fleet lies in our unity. We will not back down." Just as the team was finalizing their strategies, the alarms blared across the ship. The sensors had picked up an unexpected signal: a large force heading straight toward them. It was the Elixian fleet, and they were coming fast. "We've run out of time," Ilara said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "Prepare for battle." The Vanguard fleet went into high alert, its ships positioning themselves for the upcoming confrontation. Ilara's mind raced as she considered their options. The Elixian fleet was much larger, but they had one thing the Elixians didn't: freedom. Humanity was fighting for its right to exist on its own terms. The first shots rang out across the vast emptiness of space as the two fleets collided. The Vanguard's smaller, more nimble ships darted around the massive Elixian vessels, using their superior speed to avoid direct confrontation. They fired precise shots, targeting the Elixian ships' weak points, shields, engines, and weapon systems. Ilara watched from the command center, her eyes scanning the battlefield. Her crew was executing their plan flawlessly. The Vanguard was holding its own against the larger enemy, pushing the Elixians to react rather than dictate the pace of the battle. "Commander," Kale called out from his station, "the Elixian flagship is moving into position to engage. If we don't take it down, they'll have complete control of the battle." Ilara's mind worked quickly. The Elixian flagship was their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness. If they could destroy it, the rest of the fleet would fall into disarray. "We're going after the flagship," Ilara said, her voice decisive. "Coordinate the attack. This is our moment." The Vanguard fleet focused its firepower on the flagship, their weapons cutting through the void of space with precision. It wasn't easy. Elixian ships were formidable, and their shields were nearly impenetrable. But the Vanguard's tactics wore them down. With every shot, the flagship's defenses weakened. After what seemed like an eternity, the flagship's shield collapsed, and the Vanguard's final strike hit its core. The massive ship shuddered and exploded, a brilliant flash of light illuminating the surrounding space. The Elixian fleet faltered. Ilara's breath caught as she watched the destruction unfold. The Elixian fleet was now in disarray, their command ship gone and their forces scattered. The battle was won. But as the Vanguard ships regrouped, Ilara knew this was only the beginning. The Elixians would rebuild, and they would return. But Earth had shown them something vital. Humanity would never be an easy target. They would fight, they would defend, and they would always rise again. As the Vanguard fleet returned to Earth, the crew's morale was high. They had faced overwhelming odds and had emerged victorious. But Ilara knew the war was far from over. They had made their mark, and now the galaxy would remember that humanity was not to be underestimated. Earth had sent its message, and it would not be forgotten.